Seek Wisdom podcast. What carol are we looking at in this episode?
We're going to be looking at Angels from the Realms of Glory.
Excellent.
Which is a beautiful Christmas carol. But I want to mention just something which is fascinating. Somebody from Washington State sent me an article that is fascinating. Ornithologists have known for some time that bird songs use the same musical scales as our music.
Wow.
Isn't that fascinating? They say birds pass their songs from generation to generation.
Huh.
So a certain kind of bird has a certain melody.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they did, they sent along the actual bird calls, and I can probably imitate a few of them.
Okay.
One of them you'll recognize right away.
Uh-huh.
Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. That's a bird call.
Wait, I thought Beethoven wrote that.
Yeah. And Beethoven probably got his Fifth Symphony from that.
Uh-huh.
And then they have so many of them. Da 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 da. That's a bird call.
Wow.
Or tigga 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 tigga. And I mean, you could go on and there's just so many. Tigga tigga da 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 da. That's a bird call. And jump 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 jump. Music is in nature.
Oh, yes.
In fact, they said Mozart. This was fascinating in the article. Mozart had a starling as a pet once. Having heard Mozart play his piano concerto in C major, the starling not only imitated it, but changed the sharps to flats.
Interesting.
Mozart exclaimed, "That was beautiful." When the starling died, Mozart held an elaborate funeral for it.
Oh, wow.
But I couldn't help but remember years ago, I heard whales, that low sound that they make.
Yes.
They speed it up. It's bird calls.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yes.
So it's all in nature. In other words, God has made it, and that's what we're studying with this phonics of music, is how composers want to put that in their music, especially composers who are working with Bible words, scripture, and trying to portray it with their music and doing it successfully. Not all composers haven't done it, and I haven't done it myself all the time, but I like to try.
Oh, yes.
In fact, along the way, next year probably, this is 2021, Lord, as we live down to 2022, we're going to be talking about some of my songs.
Good.
How I took things of Handel, how things of Haydn, things of Beethoven, and used them in my music without even realizing I was doing it. Because I've always loved symphony music. I was playing in symphony orchestras when I was 15 years old. So I played in symphony orchestras all my life. When I was still back in New Jersey as a teenager, there were some men who were in New York Philharmonic who played in a little orchestra in Mountain Lakes, New Jersey. And they were also in New York Philharmonic, but they had a side job playing in that little symphony. And they heard me playing the trombone, where I could play the alto clef for the viola, or I could read the tenor clef for the cello or whatever. And so they got me a scholarship in Juilliard. In fact, when I went to Bob Jones, they got mad at me because they said, "Here, we got you you could sit in with the New York Philharmonic and you're going to give it up." And I said, "No, I have to do what God wanted me to do."
Absolutely.
I'm glad I did.
Yes.
But anyway, as we get into this Realms of Glory, before analyzing it as a carol hymn, it helps to know a little bit about the hymn and the author and the composer of the music. So this carol is no exception. No hymn writer has made a greater contribution to English hymns than the Moravian James Montgomery. He lived from 1717 to 1854. I think it's good to know when they lived.
Yes.
His parents, who were missionaries in the West Indies, died when he was a seminary student in England. So at age 30, he became an editor of a weekly paper, and because of his writing about controversial things like being against slavery, he was put in prison twice. He wrote this carol, one of the finest of our Christmas hymns, while he was in prison.
Wow.
He wrote this carol, but so many of the hymns were written under duress. One of England's greatest organists and composers of the 19th century, who also designed and built some of the England's finest organs, was Henry Smart. He lived from 1813 to 1879. He was blind for the last 15 years of his life.
Wow.
It was during this time that he composed the commensurate music for Montgomery's lyrics based on Luke 2:9. His word painting in the music contributed to this being called one of our finest Christmas carols. That is, Angels from the Realms of Glory. Now, having said that, let me point out several archetypes that composer Smart employed to accomplish his goal. First, the fact that all four voices are melodies.
Excellent.
And I want to suggest something to you here. I would suggest that if you have a group of even four, if you got a choir, and you're going to be singing the Christmas carols, or what I did with my church. For instance, I started with a church I had in Greenville. I was there 27 years. I started with 100 in the church and 8 in my choir.
Oh, wow.
When I left the church, I had 2,500 in the church and 150 in my choir.
Excellent.
But then for several years, I had a reading session, and I taught them how to read music.
Oh, good.
90 people came to the first session I had.
Excellent.
And I did it for several months. And I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and say 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. So they learn all the intervals. And it changed everything. But here, Henry Smart, he was blind, and yet he can compose music. When he painted, he contributed one of the finest Christmas carols. Let me point out some of the archetypes that he employed. First is the fact that all four voices are melodies. And I would suggest that with your choir, first have the sopranos sing their part. By the way, when my choir rehearsals, and I'm sure you do the same thing, Tim, when I'm talking to sopranos, I want the basses to listen.
Oh, yes.
I want the altos, I want the tenors to listen. So that when they hear the soprano and they're singing a part, and they know what the soprano part is.
Yes.
Otherwise, they don't get the overall picture. And that's when I worked with the altos, I wanted all the other parts to hear. Any singer would find it profitable to sing through each of the voices, become familiar with all their melodies. It helps greatly to know the other three voices when you sing your part. This was Robert Shaw. I think I mentioned that earlier. That's what Robert Shaw did with his professional singers. By the way, when I first came to Pensacola to work, many years, 1954, how many years ago was that? 66 years ago? Oh, my goodness. But when I did that, with the choir, I had only one girl who could sing alto. You know what I did for the rehearsal? I brought Robert Shaw's Christmas carols. And I had my little record player, and I played it for the choir. And I said, look, this is what I want you to sound like when I get through with you. By the way, that first year I got here in April of 1954. By Christmas of that same year, we sang the 4 major choruses out of the Messiah.
Wow.
Starting with nobody knowing anything.
Wow.
And it's amazing what you could do if you really try. So I think if Robert Shaw did it, I said if he did it, we can do it. And Robert Shaw told me that personally. That's what he did.
Good.
But Smart uses the tonic chord in this one. If you look at it, all the notes are in the key of B flat, and they're on the tonic chord, the 1 chord, we would call it. Dum, dum, bum, bum, bum. That's all. The alto, dum, 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 dum. Those are in the same key. Dum, 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 dum. That's the tenor. Then bass, bum, 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 bum. All those notes. And that's deliberate. When they say angels from the realms, he's emphasizing this is the realms of, this is where it comes from the realms of glory. So he's painting the words to get it.
Good. And he's using the tonic chord in all parts.
Yeah, and in all the parts. And even when he starts the next line of music in measure 5, he does it again. The melodies are still the same, dum, 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 but the altos, dum, 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 da, da, da. It changes it. And then the tenors, dum, 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 da, da. Different. And the bass is dum, 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 dum. And so you get the complete, because then he said, ye who sang creations. Now he's saying, now you heard the angels sing it, now you ought to sing it. So he makes it a little bit different. Henry Smart did that deliberately as a composer. Don't ignore all those parts and just sing the melody. I think we're making a mistake And I'm not against our overhead projectors. But I think we make a mistake when we just put the words up there.
Yeah.
I think there is a way. Now, you have to work it out to put all the parts on it and make it go by, keep going by. But that's available now. It can be done.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But if you just put the melody up and everybody sings the melody, you miss all the other parts.
Yeah.
And so you miss the meaning of what it's really saying.
Yeah. It's a great loss.
And it really is a great loss. So then when you get to the measure 2, if you're looking at it with me, in measure 2, the soprano goes dum da da, bass is dum da. It's in sixths. The interval of a sixth is very interesting because in the you notice in the melody dum 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 da da. That's that he put the sixth up there and highlight the word realms. Again, that's no accident. You say, well, he was not a good composer. He knew what he was doing.
Yep.
So the bass and the soprano go in sixths then. Then when you get to measure 3 and 4, actually, they're going in tenths or in thirds. You see, a third, you spread it out, becomes a tenth. And so the da, 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 the bass is da, 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 da. Here it comes all together. And then when you get to the second line and you go from measure 6, you've got the bass and the soprano going in contrary motion. Soprano's going dum da da, bass going da da dum, in the same notes but upside down. And again, that's that. Who sang what? Creation story. He's portraying creation story. When God created, what did He do? He started with nothing. Ex nihilo is called. Now, we can't do that. We have to create for what God, use what God has already made. But God started from nothing. Try that yourself. See if it doesn't work. So you get the contrary motion. And then you right away, when he gets in the next measure, measure 7, he changes it to G minor. The key of G minor. Da, da, the bass goes da, the tenor's da, da, uses the F sharp to make it G minor. And he just does it for one measure. Now, proclaim, he says, when you're going to proclaim it, let me make it a little different. But then for the Messiah's birth, he goes right back to the key of F where he's on the 5th of the chord. So he's back to the key of F, where he ended up. We're talking about what he's doing and why he's doing it. So now then you get to the last line of the music where you have the dum, da, dum, bum. That's back in his key and stay in the key of F. Come and worship. That's what he wants. He wants that to still be in the key. Then it comes, come and worship. Then he uses a chord on the last half of the second count of measure 10. If you will look at it, the tenor goes down to an A flat. And the chord is the B flat chord again. Only it's a 9th chord. It's spelled B flat, D, F, A flat, C. Now the A flat is there, and the F is left out. You just have 4 parts. You have to leave some note out.
Right,
You get a 9th chord. But that is to emphasize, come and worship. Worship. Whenever you get that one chord with usually a 7th on it, and you'll find that, we'll see that in all Christmas carols and good hymns that we look, that's the way they do it. And then he comes to measure 11, and he wants to emphasize worship. Not only worship, but who you're going to worship. Going to worship Christ, the newborn God. And so what does he do? The soprano, da, da, da. Bass goes, da, da, da. Same notes upside down again. That contrary motion is an archetype to emphasize we are worshiping Christ, the newborn King. If that doesn't get you excited, your exciter is broken. Because there are more than a dozen musical archetypes in here. Let me just take a minute and mention a couple of them for you, right?
Great.
There are 4 melodies. I mentioned that. That's one of the archetypes. And then there's a good bass line. When you have a good soprano, you want to have a good bass. And like I showed you on this one, the bass and the soprano work together. And you can leave the other parts sometimes on the same notes, but make sure the bass and the soprano are working together, almost like a duet. And then number 3 would be the leap of a 6th, to emphasize a word. And then even to put it in the harmony to point up the words. And then you get the change of key, when that one measure he went to the key of G minor, because it's a relative key. G minor is the closely related key to B flat. By the way, you folks that are not musicians, if you listen, you're going to learn a lot about music.
Yes.
And you're going to appreciate the music more just by what I'm trying to show you.
Sure.
And by the way, if you have questions, you can write to me
at weseekwisdomblog@gmail.com.
You got a question, then one of us will answer. And we may even talk together about it to be sure we give you an answer. But that he went to another key to show that and then he was painting the words. We're going to talk about so much word painting, or coloring the words. That's what they wanted to do with the music. He wanted to color it like angels from the realms. And it goes dum, dum, dum. And then come and worship. As a conductor, Tim and I are both conductors, okay? We love to conduct.
Oh, yes.
And we work with another good conductor, Dr. Gold Salves, over at Pensacola Christian College. And if you ever get a chance to watch her on the Pensacola broadcast, watch that lady when she's conducting.
Oh, yes.
She's a good conductor. And she portrays the words. That's what Tim does. That's what I want to do. So that, and then when you sing it, when you get it, angels from the, but then come and worship. Don't go, don't make it all the same. You're not just a time beater. You're a conductor.
Yes.
And I think that's what we want. So I want to mention one more thing.
Good.
And each time we talk about one of these carols, if you don't have it, you say, well, I don't have the music, then we've got 3 books we put out through Majesty Music. You can get the books from them. They'd be worth your while if you don't have any one of the 3. This song we just talked about is number 193 in Majesty Hymns. It's number 206 in Rejoice Hymns. And it's 186 in Hymnos Maestrosos.
And so that is the Spanish hymnal from Majesty? Yeah. Excellent. And we hope you found this phonological look at Angels from the Realms of Glory beneficial. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the We Seek Wisdom podcast.